and then we recited the Masahib of Chelum, which mainly revolved around Sayyida Zainab. What I propose today is that we talk mainly about Sayyida Zainab, and we recite the Masahib of the Shahada of Imam Zainul Abidin. Is that okay? Yeah. So, but before that, as an aside, in a blood-soaked Ashura this year in Rawalpindi, the mourners in the procession of Imam Hussain reacted worthily to make sure that blaring Yazid's eulogies in the ears of the mourners of Imam Hussain does not become an acceptable practice in Pakistan. Our hats are off to them. Following that, the Takfiri Deobandis allowed loud and clear that they would like to thwart the procession of Chelum in Rawalpindi. In that backdrop, the procession of Chelum in Rawalpindi reflected all that is galvanizing, motivating, and touching about Azadari. When hundreds of thousands of men and women turned up in a gathering which normally does not number more than 4,000 or 5,000, it was not an act of defiance. It was beyond that. It was an act of honor. We honored the martyrs of Karbala, but it was also an act of honor for a beleaguered minority which did a lot more than anyone else to create the country in which they are being oppressed now. It was an act of honor. It was a determined act to make an expression that we will never accept to commemorate Imam Hussain in any manner less than we did in the same towns and neighborhoods before we helped make this country. That was an important occasion. At the same time, another heartwarming occasion. In Syria, there was a huge procession despite all the suffering. People gathered in tens of thousands at the shrine of Bibi Zainab and they commemorated Chelum. And that was when people leave their personal, communal and national sufferings behind them and come forward for Azadari. That is the most profound expression of Azadari, of allegiance to Imam Hussain. Chelum is a very important occasion for us. Chelum has a history, it has a philosophy. Chelum was the culmination of the most important episode, Karbala, in the history of Islam. And Chelum was the end of the journey that began from the burnt tents in the twilight of Ashura and ended on the day of Chelum in Karbala. And that's why we, whenever we can, walk hundreds of kilometers today to reach our Imam on the day of Chelum to pay homage to our Imam. Now, as we begin the Majlis, when we talked about Imam Zainul Abidin a couple of days ago, we started with Surah Kausar because Imam Zainul Abidin is the forebearer of Surah Kausar. And today, when we talk about Sayyida Zainab, we start with Surah Asr, because that is one life which reflects the spirit and the teachings of Surah Asr. Wal Asr, by the time. God swears upon time. Innal insan lafi khusr. Verily the human, the man is in loss. Illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihat, except those who possess faith and who do the righteous deeds. Watawasaw bil haqq, watawasaw bis sabr. And those who urge one another to pursue the truth and to exercise sabr. Now before I move on, I would like to explain what sabr means, because I did not translate sabr in English. There is no word for sabr in English. Sabr is a very unique concept. It's a Quranic concept. Sabr is not patience, sabr is not perseverance, sabr is not constancy. Sabr is a lot more than that. The only English word that comes close to sabr is steadfastness. But even steadfastness does not suffice to reflect what sabr means in Quran Kareem. Sabr is a sublime concept. Sabr is the blend of knowledge, patience, piety, decency, fortitude, courage, bravery, and steadfastness in the path of truth. Sabr in Quranic sense means that whatever the price, whatever the temptation, whatever the tribulation, you don't waver from the path of truth. So sabr does not only mean that you exercise patience or you suffer in silence. Sabr means sometimes it is sabr to stay quiet. But sometimes sabr means speaking up. Sometimes sabr means withdrawing from a fight, but sometimes sabr means to engage in the fight, to stand up. And that is the Quranic concept of sabr. And tonight we will talk about a life which embodies sabr in its most sublime sense. But Quran places a lot of emphasis on sabr. When Quran says, "Inna Allaha ma'a sabirin," God is with those who exercise sabr. It does not mean that those who exercise patience. It means those who exercise sabr. I'll come back to that. And when Quran says, "Wasta'inu bis-sabri was-salat," it means that the salat that Quran envisages begins with sabr. It starts with sabr, like the salat of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. If I were to make it clear, look, angels have intellect, but they don't have emotions. They are not given emotions. Animals have emotions, but they don't have logical reasoning intellect. Only human being has been endowed with both emotions and intellect. And the Quran's entire concept of life is how you blend intellect and emotion in an optimal manner. And that is the concept of sabr. That's why sabr is unique to humans. You cannot use the word sabr for an animal. Sabr is when you exercise the ideal blend of intellect and emotions in the path of Allah. That is sabr. Now we recited Surah Asr. In Surah Asr, God swears by time. Why time? Because time is the only factor which is still beyond the grasp of human being, and I believe will always be. Everything, health, money, emotions, sins can be redeemed. Time you have no control on, and time is the reflection of God's adl. You can be poor, you can be in wretched poverty in Africa, or you can be in sublime opulence in Los Angeles or wherever. But you cannot have a second more than 24 hours. Not a second, and you cannot have, nobody can take a second away from you. So Quran's concept is how you use your time determines the quality of your life. How you imbue your time with purpose in submission to God determines the Quranic concept of life. That is one thing. That's why this surah is of sublime importance in Quran. In the early days, many Sahaba used to say, when they would part and shake each other's hands, they used to recite Surah Asr to each other. And many Mufassirin have said that if Quran only consisted Surah Asr, that would be sufficient to guide the conduct of man. So when Quran says that verily the man is in loss, what does it mean? It means the loss of principle, not the loss of profit. Every breath you take, you are spending the principle of time, which is irrecoverable. It's not a profit. In health, you can build muscles, you can build wealth, you can exercise emotions, increase your EQ, increase your IQ. Time, you can do nothing with. You can only fill it with purpose that is there to your heart. Or you can waste it in ignorance. That's why God swears upon time, because that is the loss of principle, it's not the loss of profit. The only lives that are in profit are those who use the time in accordance with God's will, and that is not only prayer, sitting on the prayer mat all the time, that is exercising sabr in life. For example, if I am drowning and you are praying and you continue praying, that is not sabr, that is haram. Sabr is that you forsake your prayer, you save my life. That is how it goes. So in that backdrop, keep in your mind Sayyida Zainab. Sayyida Zainab is the savior of Hussainiyat. Sayyida Zainab is the one who preserved the sacrifice and legacy and message of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. This story unfolds through the life of Sayyida Zainab. But this is also the story of Hazrat Ali, this is also the story of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, and this is also the story of Karbala. And whenever we congregate to pay homage to Sayyida Zainab, that is an example of inspiration, steadfastness, and adherence to the purpose of God. And we will see in next few minutes how. Sayyida Zainab was born on 5th of Jamadi al-Awwal, according to some narrations, 1st of Shaban, in 5th of Hijrah. She was the third child of Hazrat Ali and Hazrat Fatima. Hazrat Ali had 3 daughters whose name was Zainab. That's why Sayyida Zainab was known as Zainab-e-Kubra. In terms of Zainab-e-Kubra's early life, there are a number of things that stand out, but I will mention only 2. One, she was amazingly devoted to her brother Imam Hussain from a very early age. Many books have mentioned that when Sayyida Zainab used to cry in her mother's lap as a child, and she was inconsolable until her mother gave her to Imam Hussain. And once she was in Imam Hussein's hand, she would become quiet and she would just gaze at her brother. Every time Sayyida Zainab prayed, before starting her prayer, she would gaze at her brother. One day, Sayyida Fatima said to her father that my daughter is amazingly devoted to her brother. The Prophet took a deep sigh and with moistened eyes said, "Oh, my daughter, this child of mine, Zainab, will suffer 1,000 tribulations because of Hussain." Second thing, from very early on, Sayyida Zainab was highly knowledgeable. She used to give lectures to women in Medina, and they were regularly and vastly attended by different women. She used to explain the teachings of Islam, the exegesis of Quran, and a number of other teachings, till she became known in Medina as Fasiha. Fasiha is the fluent one, and Baligha. Baligha means the eloquent one. The level of her knowledge was such that she was described by our fourth Imam as Alima Ghair Muallama, somebody who possesses immense knowledge without being taught. Sayyida Zainab was also known as Bakia, the one who cries, and we all know why she was known by that name. When Sayyida Zainab grew up, there were many suitors who expressed their interest, but Hazrat Ali did not accept. Some of them he rebuked, like one called Qais bin Ashas. Till a young man called Abdullah asked for Zainab's hand. Abdullah was no ordinary man. Abdullah was the son of Jafar-e-Tayyar. Jafar-e-Tayyar was Ali's brother, 3 years older. A great warrior of Islam who the Prophet has praised profusely. Jafar-e-Tayyar was the man who led first hijrah, first migration for Muslims to Abyssinia. Abdullah was his son. Abdullah had many qualities. He was a great warrior, a brave warrior, and no less than Hazrat Ali has praised his bravery and his battle skills many a time. He fought alongside Hazrat Ali in all battles, in Jamal, Siffin, Naharwan. Abdullah was about the same age as Imam Hassan, a slightly older, but being almost the same age, Abdullah, Imam Hassan, Imam Hussain grew up together. They were very close friends, apart from being brothers. So they were always together, inseparable through their childhood and young manhood in the streets of Medina. That was Abdullah ibn Jafar-e-Tayyar. Abdullah and Zainab were married in a simple ceremony. When Imam Ali moved to Kufa in 35th of Hijrah, Zainab and Abdullah moved with Imam. And in Kufa also, Sayyida Zainab very soon distinguished herself through her excess of knowledge, her piety and her eloquence. And she became known as the eloquent princess among the women of Kufa. After Hazrat Ali's Shahadat, Abdullah and Zainab moved back to Medina. And Sayyida Zainab continued to distinguish herself through her superior knowledge and her ability to educate people and touch the hearts of women who she used to teach. And then came the time, 28th of Rajab, 60th Hijri, when Hussain left Medina. Sayyida Zainab accompanied Hussain. It could not have been otherwise. Abdullah knew that Zainab had never been separated from Hussain for the 55 years of her life. So he asked Sayyida Zainab to accompany Imam Hussain, and he also brought 2 of his sons to Imam Hussain so that they could accompany Imam. Abdullah himself could not accompany Imam because he was unwell at that time. When the caravan left, first night they camped at a place called Khuzaimiyah. At Khuzaimiyah, while Sayyida Zainab was seeing to the comforts of her brother, Imam Hussain said, that which will come to pass has been since long ordained. Now Sayyida Zainab knew that her beloved brother is moving towards danger. After that, for 4 months and 11 days, through Mecca, through a long and arduous journey, and in Karbala, Zainab was always with Imam Hussain. She was always worried about her brother. Imam Hussain reached Karbala on 2nd of Muharram, and Zainab was constantly with Imam Hussain in every decision. When the tents were removed, when the water was forbidden, so connected was she and so present that on 9th of Muharram, when Umar ibn Saad's army attacked without notice, Sayyida Zainab was the first one who heard the horses of the enemy advancing, even before Hazrat Abbas and Imam Hussain. On the day of Ashura, Sayyida Zainab sacrificed her 2 sons on Imam Hussain but could not save her brother. And then came Sham-e-Ghariba. In Sham-e-Ghariba, Sayyida Zainab is not just Zainab. She is Hussain, she is Abbas, she is Ali. She saved the women from burning tents. She saved Sakina from being burnt alive. She pulled our Imam out of the burning tents to keep him alive. And then he gathered all the women and children around her on the ashes of the burnt tents and consoled them through the night. In the morning, the family of Prophet was herded. They were put on the camels, bare backs of camels, and they were herded towards Kufa. When they passed through the Maqtals in Karbala, Sayyida Zainab saw that all the bodies of the martyrs were lying covered in blood, wounds and dust on the sands of Karbala, while the enemies had buried their dead. Like Ali was saying, they had offered the prayer for their dead and they buried them, and they left Muhammad's son and his companions lying on the sand, beheaded, naked. Umar ibn Sa'd asked each person from different tribes to carry one head of the martyr, so that nobody could intercept or interrupt the caravan on the path, showing that every tribe participated in the battle. And then they reached Kufa, where Zainab was once the princess. Zainab delivered a memorable sermon in the main street of Kufa, and that was first of the many memorable speeches she was to deliver. And then they reached in the court of Ibn Ziyad, Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad ibn Abi. They reached the court of Ibn Ziyad. Ibn Ziyad, although Sayyida Zainab was raggedly dressed, her head was uncovered and she was tired, she entered the court with an awe-inspiring dignity and took her place in silence. Ibn Ziyad was shocked at such dignity and boldness, and he asked someone, "Who is this woman?" Sayyida Zainab didn't say anything, but someone else responded that this is Ali's eldest daughter, Zainab. And then he looked towards Sayyida Zainab and said, "Oh, your brother Hussein and your kinsmen have suffered for what they did, and their schemes have come to naught." Now, Sayyida Zainab spoke. She said, "O Ibn Ziyad, Allah had willed that my brother and his companions be martyred, and they have met their deaths bravely. And if you so wished, then I can understand that you should be content. But you killed the man who the Prophet loved the most, who Rasulullah held upon his knees as a child, and whose play filled Rasulullah's heart with pleasure. Very soon you will be with Hussein and Rasulullah before Allah, and they will demand justice. O son of Marjana, beware of the day of reckoning." A silence fell upon the court. Many of the people still remembered the eloquence and articulation of Hazrat Ali, and they thought that Hazrat Ali was speaking. Ibn Ziyad had no answer, so he turned angrily towards a young man and said, "Who is this young man?" The youth replied, "I am Ali, the son of Hussein." Ibn Ziyad was disappointed that he was still alive. He said, "Why did you leave him alive? Kill him." When Sayyida Zainab heard this, she threw herself upon her brother and said, "No, you will have to kill me before you kill him." And then, on the urging of his own companions and courtiers, Sayyid Ibn Ziyad had to spare the life of our young Imam. So within 3 days, Sayyida Zainab saved the life of our Imam 2 times. She saved the institution of Imamat. She saved the progeny of Prophet, the Sayyids flourishing around the world. This is Sayyida Zainab. After a few days in Kufa, the caravan left for Damascus. Now, it was the arduous journey, as we all know, all along 600 miles, 1000 kilometers. The women suffered untold hardships. They were whipped, they were pushed, and they were sitting on the bare backs of camels. And the journey was much longer than normal because the army of Yazid was circumventing the major towns. They passed through some of the major cities or towns. They passed through Karbala, they passed through Baalbek, they passed through Mosul, and they passed through Homs. But they were circumventing so as for the people to not to know that the family of Prophet had suffered, especially in Iraq, where there still was a lot of allegiance and liking for Hazrat Ali. So it took much longer, and often they would make detours, and when they made detours, they made the camels run faster to cover up for the extra distance. Many children perished because of the rigors of the journey, and many others died by falling off the backs of camels. And then finally, the caravan reached Damascus. When Yazid learned that they have arrived, he asked them to hold the caravan at the gates of Damascus because he wanted the city to be embellished. He wanted his palace to be spruced up, he wanted the announcement to be made, he wanted music to be played, he wanted people to buy festive clothes so that they can greet the family of Prophet with stones and sticks. When they got the permission to enter the city, Sayyida Zainab and Imam Zainul have said that it took them 12 hours to reach the palace, and those were the most difficult 12 hours. The family of Prophet was roped, they were tied in ropes together, and they were herded like goats. They were herded like goats, and they were whipped all the way. The women were whipped all the way. And then they reached the palace of Yazid. There he was, Yazid ibn Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan ibn Harab ibn Umayyah, sitting on his throne, rejoicing in the plight of the family of Prophet, rejoicing in seeing the daughters of Fatima chained and bound before him. Then the head of Imam Hussain was brought to Yazid in a golden tray. Yazid hurt the teeth of Imam Hussain with his stick, and he said, "O Hussain, you have paid for your revolt. If my ancestors killed by your father on the day of Badr were alive today, they would have seen that I have avenged them. I have taken their revenge." And then he said, "Verily, now it is clear that Bani Hashim staged a play. There was never an angel, there was never a divine revelation." And Sayyida Zainab spoke. Now this moment is the zenith of the struggle of Sayyida Zainab. A woman, imagine, a woman who has seen her brothers, her sons, all her dear ones slaughtered and trampled upon before her eyes. A woman who left their unburied corpses on the burning sands of Karbala in blood and dust. A woman who sat on bare camel backs for 1,000 kilometers for weeks. A woman who was whipped all along those 1,000 kilometers. A woman who had seen the children falling off the backs of camel, dying and being left unburied because the caravan could not stop. This woman is not awed by the occasion. neither is she debilitated by her suffering. You have all read the sermon of Sayyida Zainab. We don't have the time to recount the entire sermon, but there are some of the objectives which I would like to draw your attention to that the sermon fulfilled, especially the younger people. You have to remember it is important. One, she questioned the false elation of Yazid's victory, and she proved through Quran that the God gives sinners time to put the rope around their necks. That is first. Second, she reproached Yazid for taking Prophet's family as captive. No, she did not reproach. She said, Yabna talaka. Oh, the son of the slave freed by us. This harks back to the conquest of Mecca when Yazid's family was freed by the Prophet. They were captured by Islamic armies and they were freed by the Prophet. And Sayyida Zainab made 2 points here. Understand, one, that this is what we did to you and this is what you do to us. That was also after Badr and Uhud. And the second point, she called him Yabna Talaka. In Islam, Talaka was not considered deemed fit to become Khalifa because they became Muslim at the time of conquest of Mecca in the face of sword. So their loyalty was not beyond doubt. Sure. And Hazrat Umar has been narrated in Tabaqat ibn Sa'd that among Talaka there should never be a Khalifa. So she not only questioned Yazid, she questioned his father. This is ultimate wisdom and bravery. And then she exposed Yazid's motives. Yazid's hereditary, psychological, emotional and familial motives. Sayyida Zainab talked about Hind, grandmother of Yazid. She said, oh, your mother chewed the liver of Hamza on the day of Uhud. She talked about Abu Sufyan, the grandfather. He said, your grandfather was an overt enemy of Islam. He never showed allegiance to Rasulullah from the heart, and he always attacked Islam. And then she referred to Yazid's father, Muawiyah, saying that he was the one who divided the Ummah, he was the one who infused bid'at, changes, alterations in the Shariat Muhammadi, and he desecrated all that God respected. These are Sayyida Zainab's words. These are the objectives that the khutbah achieves. Number 3. And number 4, she rebuked Yazid's poetry about Badr. Now there are 2 points to understand here. One, she answered Yazid's poetry by Quran. But she reminded everyone of her mother who once upon a time when summoned in a court like Zainab had answered a fabricated hadith by Quran. And here Zainab is doing the same thing, answering poetry by Quran. And then she said that Yazid, by slaying, by killing my brother and his companions, you have in fact slain yourself. And this is the concept of Surah Asr, when she said that verily you are in loss, martyrs are the custodians of glory, they are pure spirits. And then she said that those who paved the way for Yazid to come in power are the collaborators of Yazid, not companions, accomplices, if you want English word, which includes Yazid's father, which includes Mughira bin Shu'bah, which includes everyone who had shown allegiance to Yazid. Sayyida Zainab put them all together. That's why we say, Walan Allahi ummatan samiyat bidalika faraziyat bih. Sayyida Zainab said it. And then she introduced herself and her pedigree. Why? Because Yazid was not a ruler of a princely state in India. You have to understand who Yazid was. Yazid was the king of the most powerful empire on earth at that particular moment in time. And this lady is talking to him. And when she recounts the glory of her family, she makes Yazid feel so little in front of 700 dignitaries who were sitting there. That is the eloquence of Sayyida Zainab. And then she finally said, an eighth point in my mind, that Yazid, if you think that you will obliterate immortal good mention of Ahlul Bayt, then that will not happen, because the glory is for us, we are on the right path. Now, having 1,374 years on, having braved temperatures that are beyond human endurance, you are sitting here tonight. That's a testimony to Sayyida Zainab's word. That's a testimony, that's a tribute to Sayyida Zainab's word. She pronounced it before Yazid. Hussein is victor, Hussein was the victor, and Hussein will remain the victor. Yazid lost yesterday, Yazid will lose today, and Yazid will lose in future. So, when this happened, Yazid had no answer. He was dumbfounded. He started reciting poetry which had nothing to do with the occasion. And then finally he consigned them to prison. Now when I say prison, it's not a prison cell. It was a dungeon with a small shed. It is still preserved, with a small shed with a fence around it. With a fence around it. Sayyida Zainab says that the roof was insufficient to shelter the entire party. She says that most of us used to be outside most of the time. And she says that it used to be so cold at night that we could not sleep. Now it's desert temperature. And we are talking about late November in Damascus, which is 4 or 5 degrees at night. And we are talking about a place which has more than 3,000 hours of sun per year. So she says that during the day the sun used to burn in our eyes and we could not sleep. And then the hardships of those prisons and the preceding journey claimed the beloved daughter of Imam Hussein. When Hazrat Ruqayyah passed away, Imam Zainul Abidin buried her. But it was Sayyida Zainab who cried while bathing the young girl when she saw the marks of torture on the body of the young princess. Look, this is what Zainab is. And then after a few days, Yazid freed the prisoners, but Zainab put a condition. She said, no, before I leave, I want to mourn for my brother in Damascus. And Yazid had no option but to provide them with a house to do so. And the first Majlis was recited by Zainab in the heart of Damascus residential area. Ulamas have written that Syed Sajjad used to sit on the floor and Sayyida Zainab used to recount what had befallen them to the ladies of Syria who would gather around them. And she continued to do it for up to 7 days. And then the caravan got ready to leave. When the caravan left for Medina through Karbala, Sayyida Zainab ordered that the litters, Amaris, the litters on the camels be shrouded in black, be wrapped in black, so that everyone along the way knows that these travelers are mourners. This was the first Jahlum procession. This was the first Jahlum procession. All along the way to Karbala, they recited Majlis-e-Azaa at many places. in many villages and towns, and people would gather and learn what had actually happened. And then they commemorated Chehlum in Karbala, which we discussed 3 days ago. When they left Karbala, when Medina was in sight, Sayyida Zainab ordered the women to alight from the camel and pitch their tents outside of Medina. When people of Medina came to know, they all flocked in droves towards Ahlul Bayt. And Sayyida Zainab and Abid Bimar recounted what had happened to them. Finally, when Sayyida Zainab decided to enter the city, she decided that the entire caravan plus the people of Medina would walk on foot. So they entered Medina on foot, not on camels, the horses, and black flags were raised aloft. That was the procession, if you want the history, led by Sayyida Zainab. When Sayyida Zainab entered Medina, she immediately went to the Prophet's shrine. She recounted him the massacre of Imam Hussain and his companions and the ordeal of their captivity. By the time Sayyida Zainab came back to Medina, she had become very old. She had aged. Her hair had turned grey and her back had bent only at a young age of 56. But the work of one of the greatest lives in human history was done. Sayyida Zainab passed away a few months after in 62nd Hijrah. Abdullah ibn Jafar also passed away around the same time, give and take a few months. What I find worth noting here is when Imam Hussain passed away, he was 57 years old when he was killed, he was martyred. And there were two infallibles and one nearly infallible in Karbala, Imam Baqir, Imam Zainul Abidin, and Sayyida Zainab. All three of them died at the age of 57. Imam Zainul Abidin, born in 38 Hijri, died in 95, 57. Imam Baqir, born in 57, died in 114, 57. Sayyida Zainab, 5th Hijri and 62nd Hijri. It could be a coincidence, but it's well worth noting. All of them died at the age of 57. Nobody lived beyond the age of Abul Ahrar, Sayyid al-Shuhada. So, now, we have talked about Sayyida Zainab, but for the younger people here, what are the contemporary lessons? Some of those, there are many. Some of those you have gleaned from what I have said about sabr, about righteous life. Some others come to my mind. There are hundreds of lessons. They cannot be summed up in one speech. But one, look at any sermon of Sayyida Zainab. You will not find a shred of self-pity. Sabr is not self-pity. Sabr is courage, is bravery, and you decide what you have to do. It's not passive, it's active. Self-pity, now psychologically, has been proven the single most destructive human sentiment. And I marvel when I read these sermons, not a shred of self-pity. There is no shame in Islam in being oppressed. There is no insult in being persecuted. The pride, if you are persecuted, you suffer in the path of God. One point. Second point, we all know that the courage he displayed was the limit of human beings, ultimate limit. But one more thing, if you look at her conduct throughout, when she spoke with reason, she spoke with eloquence, but she spoke with intellect, and she spoke directly. What I marvel the most, the wording of her sermons is so direct. She dismantles the arguments given by Ibn Ziyad or Yazid. She anticipates what they would say and she dismantles them in anticipation. She preempts. And this is the Quranic concept of hayat-e-aqli. This is the life of intellect that Sayyida Zainab displayed in that most difficult period a human can imagine. Third, she showed, and this is for my sisters and daughters, she showed that women, the female, have a political role to play in Islam. Rasulullah had set the precedence when he had brought Sayyida Zahra in Mubahila, and Sayyida Zainab reaffirmed it. And four, she crowned the emancipation of women that had started with the advent of Islam. Now, for my sisters and daughters, in our religion, in our faith, we owe everything to ladies. Imam Hussein's legacy, he owes it to his sister, a woman. Rasulullah's Kausar we talked about, he owes it to whom? To his daughter, a woman. Progeny. And Sayyida Zahra has the pivotal position among Panjatan. Very briefly, I will tell you, remember this, nobody in Panjatan has a direct relationship with other four. Hussain, for example, has a direct relationship with other three, but not with Rasulullah. It is through his mother and father. Similarly, for Hazrat Ali, Imam Hassan, Fatima Zahra is the only one who has a direct relationship with all the four. Remember this, she is pivotal. Rasulullah's relationship with Ali, through Abu Talib, through Abdullah Abu Talib. Ali's relationship with Rasulullah through Fatima or his father. Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein's relationship with Rasulullah through Ali or Fatima is the pivotal position. Fatima has a direct relationship with every other person among the Panjatan. It's not only that she is the only lady. So this is the importance of ladies. हमने तय किया था कि जनाब सैयद साजिदीन के मसाइब आज बयान करेंगे. अब ना मुझ में इतनी ताकत, ना मुझ में इतनी सलाहियत और ना मुझे इतना इल्म कि सैयद साजिदीन के मसाइब से मैं इंसाफ कर सकूं, बयान कर सकूं, मगर मेरे दिल को ये यकीन है कि आबिद बीमार पे रोने के लिए आपको मुझ जैसे बेबिज़ाअत ज़ाकिर की ज़रूरत नहीं है. आपके दिलों में आबिद बीमार का गम है, आपकी नसों में आबिद बीमार का गम है, आपकी आंखों में जो पानी है उसमें आबिद बीमार का गम है. कौन आबिद बीमार? आबिद बीमार जो इतने लागर थे कूफा से रवानगी के वक्त के ऊंट पर बैठ नहीं सकते थे. मेरे इमाम को ऊंट पर बिठाकर उनकी टांगों को कस के बांध दिया गया, यहाँ तक कि मेरा मौला जब शाम पहुंचा है तो तारीख लिखती है कि रानों का गोश्त उधड़ चुका था. ये आबिद बीमार से किसी ने पूछा कि मौला कहाँ मसाइब सबसे ज्यादा पड़े? कहा दमिश्क. हमें इस तरह से कैदी बना के लाया गया था, यूं रस्सियों में जिकड़ के लाया गया था जैसे तुर्को दैलम के भागे हुए गुलाम लाए जाते हैं. सैयदो साबिरीन है. हमने आज सब्र का जिक्र किया, आपके जहनों में है. सैयदो साबिरीन एक है, उसका नाम है आबिद बीमार. इमाम जाफर सादिक से किसी ने पूछा कि मौला آپ کے جد علی ابن ابی طالب نے اتنا صبر کیا، 24 سال صبر کیا. آپ کے جد حسین نے ان سے بھی بڑھ کے صبر کیا، بیٹے کی لاش پہ صبر کیا، بھائی کے شانے اٹھاتے ہوئے صبر کیا، سجدہ آخر میں صبر کیا. مولا مگر کیا بات ہے کہ سید الصابرین آپ کے دادا زین العابدین کو کہتے ہیں، نہ علی کو نہ حسین کو. امام جعفر صادق نے کہا کہ اے شخص تو ٹھیک کہتا ہے، میرے جد علی بہت بہادر تھے، انہوں نے شجاعت پہ صبر کیا، ان کا حق چھینا گیا، انہوں نے صبر کیا، ناانصافی پہ صبر کیا. میرے جد حسین ابن علی انتہائی صابر تھے. صبر ہماری میراث ہے، صبر ہمارا افتخار ہے، صبر ہمارا ورثہ ہے. میرے جد حسین ابن علی نے شجاعت پہ صبر کیا، ناانصافی پہ صبر کیا، غم و اندوہ پہ صبر کیا، تکلیف پہ صبر کیا، پیاس پہ صبر کیا، بھوک پہ صبر کیا، زخموں پہ صبر کیا. مگر میرے دادا عابد بیمار نے شخص ان سب سے بڑھ کر ان تمام چیزوں پہ تو صبر کیا، لیکن میرے دادا نے غیرت پہ صبر کیا. ارے غیرت پہ صبر کرنا، غیور بیٹا کوفہ میں داخلہ، ہاتھوں میں ہتھکڑیاں، پیروں میں بیڑیاں، اور ہاتھ میں اس ناقے کی مہار جس پہ وہ پھوپیاں بیٹھی ہوئی ہیں جو اس کوفے میں شہزادی بن کے رہ چکی تھیں. یہ غیرت کا امتحان ہے. ارے عابد بیمار غیرت کا امتحان. کوفہ میں قافلہ داخل ہوا، کسی نے حبیب ابن مظاہر کا سر نیزے پر دیکھا، جا کے اس کے بیٹے کو خبر کی کہ قافلہ آیا ہے، تمہارے باپ کا سر نیزے پر ہے. حبیب ابن مظاہر کے بیٹے نے اپنے دوستوں کو جمع کیا، اپنے قبیلے والوں کو جمع کیا، اپنے احباب کو جمع کیا. ایک مرتبہ سب تلواریں کھینچ کے آئے، مزاحم ہوئے لشکر کی راہ میں. عمر ابن سعد نے پوچھا کیا چاہتے ہو؟ کہا ہمارے باپ کا سر ہمیں دے دو. قریب تھا کہ جنگ ہو جاتی، مگر عمر ابن سعد سے شمر نے کہا کہ سر ان کو دے دو، کیا فائدہ ہے لڑنے سے. حبیب ابن مظاہر کا سر ان کے بیٹے کو دے دیا گیا. بیٹا باپ کا سر لے کے اکڑتا ہوا یہ کہتا ہوا چلا کہ جس کا وارث زندہ ہو اس کا سر یوں در بدر نہیں ہوتا. اور عابد بیمار زنجیروں میں جکڑا ہوا میرا امام. اور شام میں غیرت کا امتحان اگر آپ نے سمجھنا ہے تو ایک جملے میں سمجھ لیجئے. کسی معصوم